Welcome friends to another r/prorevenge video. So I was checking my statistics and it turns out that only one of you guys aren't subscribed. So if you don't want to be that one holdout, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. That said, our first story of the day is by Crispy Noir, a petty microphone cold war with a music teacher. This was back in mid-2019, right when I graduated from high school. My school hosts annual last day of school concerts for students, and frankly, our school is notorious for its very unreliable sound system and a lack of musical equipment. There's always something either missing or broken, so borrowing equipment from students is common and somewhat expected. On the day of, an 8th grade music teacher, let's call him Mr. Venus, whom I never really met before, asked if he could borrow my microphone for the concert. They needed extra. I usually lend my music stuff to the school concerts anyway. He knows this too, so no biggie, he could have it. They always come back in one piece, and the school faculty are quite responsible with borrowed stuff. Except for this one time, for some reason, while I couldn't attend the concert, it came back with a huge dent on the steel mesh. The next day, Mr. Venus returned my dented mic nonchalantly and didn't even mention the very obvious dent there. He just handed it to me, said thank you, and went back to his phone. I was the one to bring it up to him and told him it definitely wasn't there when I lent it to him. He said something along the lines of, "Oh, I'm sorry, was probably one of the performers who dropped it. That happens all the time with kids, haha." I told him it was still his responsibility even if he didn't drop it himself. He replied with, don't worry, it still works though. It was gonna dent sometime anyway. No musicians without one, ha ha ha. As vocally pissed off at him as I was, he was right. Most dynamic microphones do drop all the time, and the mesh will get dented eventually. It still works fine and you don't need to replace it. I probably shouldn't have lent something somewhat expensive to someone I don't really know either. Still, I was extremely annoyed. The next day, which was also the last day of school, I waltzed into the music room that he is responsible for, sneakily snatched a pristine music room microphone, brought it to a classroom with no one in it, and made it drop 5 feet right onto the ceramic floor. There was a loud clang upon impact, and sure enough, it was quite dented, but still works fine. Besides, that was my very last day of school, and no one saw me go in or out of those 2 rooms. So all eyes should be on Mr. Bennis about that dented school microphone. Or no one would care about some dented mic. Whatever, still satisfied I could get an eye for an eye. Or steel mesh for a steel mesh, I guess. In your guys' opinions, would you say an experience like this would forever change how you would feel about letting people borrow your stuff? Whether it's getting something in writing saying, oh, we'll be responsible if we cause any damages to whatever, or just making you way more less likely to ever let someone borrow stuff? Would it change things for you? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Meltdown. Insult your head closer instead of give a raise? Yeah, sure, there's no way that'll backfire. In the late 90s, I worked at a Subway restaurant, specifically closing shift. That'll be relevant later. At the time, I was paid somewhere between $7 and $8 an hour, a good chunk more than minimum wage, and had me bringing my A game every day. I knew it was just fast food, but I took pride in my work. I showed up early, always covered when people called in, followed the recipes, even the really particular stuff like 2 slices of black olive per 6-inch sub, unless the customer specifically requests more, etc. By all accounts, I was a model employee. Plus, since I worked alone, I was the de facto shift supervisor. That's gotta be worth something. I figured I'd ask the regional manager for a raise. The store manager didn't have the authority. The worst he can do is say no, right? Wrong. Turns out, the worst he can do is insult me and everyone else that works there. He was in one day, and I made my pitch. He just went off on me, raising his voice shy of a full yell and saying something like, "If you were worth more, you wouldn't be working here. You're replaceable. Now go away and don't ever speak to me again. I'm the regional manager and I'm actually important. You just make sandwiches and scrub toilets." Again, not the exact words, but he did make those points quite clearly. I remember being shocked into silence at such a cartoonish display of arrogance coming out of a balding middle-aged man. First time I'd ever encountered a .50 caliber D-bag. I didn't even specify an amount, I just asked for a raise. He could have given me a nickel, or even made something up like, "I'm sorry, wages are set by corporate, I can't do it." And while I'd have been disappointed, I'd have accepted it. But no, his response to the very concept of any raise was a pretentious, self-righteous indictment against the value of every Subway employee that wasn't management. Or probably him specifically. I genuinely enjoyed working there, right up until that watershed moment. Okay, jerk, if that's how you want it, fine. I'll get mine one way or another. I take pride in my work, but 7-something an hour isn't enough to engender any further loyalty after you so flippantly insulted me and everyone working for you. Up until that point, I had been meticulous about everything I did at work. Like I mentioned, earlier closing shift was a one-man show, which meant I had no supervision. My effectiveness was judged based on the accuracy of my inventory numbers, counting my till, my clock-out times, and whether everything was in order when openers arrived in the morning. I knew a few tricks to offset inventory, which allowed me to take home food without it getting noticed. Ring up a small soda as a cheese round since they were both 89 cents, etc. On a good night, I'd take home a dozen or more foot-long subs. On a bad night, I'd just make sandwiches with the loaf of bread I brought from home. I'd also bring in a bunch of empty bottles or jugs and fill them from the fountain after clocking out. I'd dump entire Cambros full of meat, veggies, and cheese into a bag to take home. Sometimes I'd make an oven full of cookies with the express purpose of taking them, if I could do so without using up the rest of a box. Because a box with one raw cookie was counted the same as an unopened box. The moment he made it clear what I was worth to him, I started looking for a different job. If he had given me a token 3% cost of living increase, it'd have amounted to maybe 25 cents per hour. They had me working around 30 to 35 hours a week, just below full-time, so it would have amounted to under $9 a week. Heck, he could have even offered a sincere apology and no raise, and I would have kept on with it. Instead, for the last few months I worked there, every single night I took home what probably amounted to a couple $100 worth of potential sales. Every single night. At the time, my friends and I, being late teens and early 20s, were still in the party phase of our lives. So every night I worked for those last months, I'd roll up just as the party was getting wild with a bunch of sandwiches, cookies, gallons of soda, etc. Those few months doing the bare minimum and sponging off that dead-end job were way more satisfying than giving my all for 7 and change for an insufferable bag of septic slop. I think the most impressive thing is OP didn't get caught stealing hundreds of dollars of stock. Do I blame OP for what they did? No, because the way that regional manager acted was ridiculous, but do I think it was necessarily okay what OP did? Gets a little bit more blurry there. Our next story is by Mangelo. Told my entire company my pay rate as I was walking out the door. I wanted to stir up some poop. I knew I wasn't going to use this particular company as a reference, and I was already hired at the next company, and I had my first day all scheduled. And I was angry at the company I was leaving for various reasons. So on my last day, as I was downloading my pay stubs and insurance information and anything else I might need in the future pertaining to my HR with the company, I stumbled on an org chart. Curious, I exported to CSV. Oh wow, this org chart has everybody's email address. I cleaned up the spreadsheet so it just had email addresses, saved it, edited it in Notepad so it gives me only email addresses in CSV format and easy to copy and paste. Then I made a burner Gmail address. I know Gmail was accepted inbound by the company because I've worked there forever and received email from Gmail addresses all the time. About a week after I left, a week into my new job, I sent an email to the entire company from my burner Gmail that said, "I'm a previous employee. I made so-and-so dollars an hour upon my termination in 2020. I never received a performance evaluation in the 4 years I worked with company. Signed, Furious in Florida." The signature was my little homage to Ann Landers. I kept it short and sweet, only said the one thing that no employers want you to say to your coworker, your pay rate. I worked there until 2021, but I figured maybe if I say 2020, it might be a little less obvious it was me. They fired a lot of people at the start of COVID. I knew I was making more than a lot of people there, but I was still in the middle of the pay range compared to others. The HR rep refused an exit interview, only giving me a PDF survey to sign and slip under his door on my way out. So, I forced my exit interview on the whole company. I hope I stirred up some poop. All I know is if I was working somewhere and some disgruntled former employee emailed my work email saying, "Hey, I made such and such amount," if that was considerably more than I was making, it would definitely get some hamster wheels turning in my head. I'd be like, am I getting underpaid? Am I getting shafted right now? Our next story is by Studs Mulek OCK. My best act of petty revenge started with frozen shrimp. A few years ago, I was dating a dude who seemed dope as freak when we met, but gradually devolved into a real jerk over the span of 5 months. My line in the sand was drawn when he borrowed my car and left me stranded in downtown St. Louis in a winter storm. Long story short, he'd been messing around with another chick in my car, and I 86'd his cheating butt, but not before he tried to slap me around a bit. When I went to his apartment the next day to gather my stuff, I had a bag of frozen shrimp in my purse. I went in his bathroom and very hastily took the plastic end cap off one side of the shower curtain rod and filled the now hollow rod with the shrimp. Reassembled, grabbed my things, and never spoke to him again. I still fantasize about the fallout and aftermath. Rotting shrimp is one of the worst smells in existence, and who the freak checks inside their shower curtain rod for the source of the smell? I rarely hold grudges, but I hope what I did was so horrendous that this idiot still has PTSD every time he sees a Red Lobster commercial. Come on down to Red Lobster, we have all you can eat shrimp. I can just imagine somebody who got tortured by some evil rotten shrimp smell in their bathroom, that upon mere mention of seafood they're starting to feel that regurgitating feeling in their stomach. This next story is by Ordinary Bloke 1963. I was told off for not phoning ahead to a customer with an ETA for a delivery. So, next time I went there, here's what happened. I wasn't aware we had agreed to notify them roughly when I was going to be there, and felt he'd spoke to me rather harshly the first time. A week after the original incident, I was heading to the same complex. I watched the curtain twitch as I pulled into the delivery base. He unlocked his office door. This was during Lockdown 1 in England. I could see him punching the code to open the landing doors. As I located the parcel, I saw him come down and unlock the lobby doors and then punch another code to release the front sliding doors. He snapped very gruffly, "You didn't phone ahead again." I replied in a very cheerful and polite voice, "That's because your neighbor doesn't require me to," and walked past him to the building next door. I will say that there must be some level of enjoyment that you get, making them get up off their butt and unlock the door, make them do the whole hustle and bustle just to go right by them. And our final story of the day is by Duality Freak, Christmas Spirit. So a quick backstory, my brother is 14 years older than me, so he's in his 40s. He has 2 kids that are the spitting image of him. My brother's the typical give an inch, take a mile type, and never seems to take care of what he has, including his children, and doesn't have a license due to fines and such, so he relies on others. He also couldn't step outside his house without taking, 12 plus hits on his bong. Come Christmas 2019, he decides he wants to be at our house for Christmas. We live 4 hours away. I also live with my parents, so they always fell into his trap. So my dad, who was diabetic, drove to pick the 4 of them up, brings them home. I don't get much details from the drive, but I can imagine he was loud and couldn't put his cape down. And once they arrive, they unpack the car. We'd all arranged a 3-day arrangement, so food and stuff. Well, Christmas came and went, very as you'd expect. Yelling abuse and demanding my mother to dote on him hand and foot, like I caught her serving him ice cream, not his kids. I believe she was more afraid of him than anything. That was the last straw for me and my partner. After we arranged for him to go home, they opted for a bus since we all worked, he didn't. They missed it. Mind you, it was an early bus like 6 a.m. A bus left each hour, missed all of them. Well, I could see what was happening, so we hatched our plan. We have a smart house, a Google Nest in each main room, so after they missed the first bus, I set "All I Want for Christmas Is You" on repeat all day. While I was at work, I checked if it had been paused or not. Each time it was paused, I'd resume it and crank the volume. Well, when I got home, he was singing it. That annoyed me, so I played nice and went to my room with my partner. After a long discussion of what BS he got up to through the day, we decided to find the most obnoxious country songs and crank the volume on every Google Nest. 30 minutes later, he was trying to organize the lift. Not a massive win, but the backstory on my brother is far too deep to go on here. A lot of stories and stuff that's illegal that I don't know whether to believe him or not. The one thing I will say, if you're trying to annoy somebody and get them to leave, Mariah Carey is probably not a top option. Especially not one of the most beloved Christmas songs of all time. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.